Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, and it's time once again to talk about the rules of Arkham Horror the card game. Now, when the new taboo list came out recently, there was an interesting reaction from the community regarding the mutation to Chuck Fergus. So, brief explanation of the card, as written, Chuck Fergus is an ally that allows you to do some fancy things with tactic or trick events. As a reaction, when you play a tactic or trick event, exhaust Chuck Fergus to do two of the following, or just one for his level 2 version. That event gains fast. That event costs 2 fewer resources to play, or you get +2 skill value while performing a test during the resolution of that event. So, for breaking and entering, you could, say, make this not cost an action or any resources. Very strong. So, the tabooed version is now, the first bullet point now reads, that event gains fast, play only during your turn. Most Arkham players looked at this and said, wait, what? Isn't that already how it works? While a select few complained that the original text was what made Chuck interesting in the first place. We'll come back to that later, but to explain the whole confusion, it's time to revisit our old friend, inconsistent templating, and focus on the keyword fast. Here's what the Arkham Horror Rules reference has to say about fast. It's a keyword ability, and it means that you don't play the card with an action at all. How and when do you play the card then? Well, there are separate sections for assets and events, the two types of cards that are played in the game. Let's start with assets. Assets that have the fast keyword simply say fast on them. You probably know magnifying glass. It's right there at the front of the card, and there's nothing else there. But the keyword can also be hidden amongst a lot of other text, such as here on the new Sacred Oath. Do you see it in there? Anyhow, the rules say that a fast asset may be played by an investigator during any player window on their turn. Two things to note. The player window means that you can't slap down a magnifying glass from your hand anytime you like, say after you draw a chaos token. As we'll see shortly, there are some events that do specify that you can play them during strange timing points like that one. Second, even though it doesn't say it on magnifying glass itself, you're only allowed to play it on your turn. So should we pretend that all fast assets actually say play only on your turn, but just don't to save space? Well, just kidding. Talisman of Protection explicitly says this. Is this just more inconsistent templating? Maybe, probably. Now, it's probably not intended, but all this means that Bob Jenkins can't help you play any fast assets in your hand since he'd be playing them on his turn, not yours, and fast cards aren't played using the play action, which Bob's ability sure is. Yeah, it'd be a waste of an action, but he might want to help pay for it or play it under someone else's control. Not being able to? Well, that's kind of weird, isn't it? I've never really been comfortable about this rule about fast assets anyways. What are they trying to prevent you from doing? If you can only play them on your turn and during a player window, well, can William York really play something like Favor of the Sun from the discard pile after he defeats an enemy? I know it says it's an asset, and you can play an asset after you defeat an enemy, but after you defeat an enemy, it's definitely not a player window. And what if he defeats the enemy when it's not his turn? Can he still play fast assets? This is exactly the issue at hand with the new Agatha Crane and her ability to play cards at the end of her turn. The new FAQ doesn't exactly address it in the way that I'd like. So is she able to play fast assets without the usual player window available? But we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit as far as events goes. Now, admittedly, this question feels weird and seems more like a bug in the rules framework rather than anything intentional. So please don't take this discussion as serious rules interpretation about William York. I simply want to explore the way that players read and intuit the rules, the text on the cards, and how we all can be a bit better about making the intentions of cards less inscrutable. Here's what I think is really going on. The original writers of the rulebook didn't mean for this section to be taken so literally. A fast asset may be played. It doesn't say can only be played, although Talisman of Protection says that. It's just that they're giving you a suggestion of when you could use fast cards, because you aren't using play actions to play them. The rules don't really contemplate being able to play them using other card abilities like Yorick or Bob, and they didn't think that you would have any reason to play an asset outside of your turn, since you're pretty much restricted to playing non-fast assets on your turn in the first place. So why bother saying anything about this? And yet, I'm still stuck on that may be played. Should we read this as permissive or restrictive? The same could be asked of events that say something like play during any player window. Does it mean that you can only play these during any player window? The rules do at least kind of explain what permissions and restrictions mean, but in my opinion, doesn't really say enough about how to tell if the rules about fast assets are a restriction, or if something like York or Agatha's abilities are giving you special permission overriding the text on the card or in the rules. For the record, there's no doubt in my mind that it's intended that you can play all of these cards outside of the normal timing windows, especially given that FAQ about Agatha, but I'm not happy about the rules framework one way or another. It could just be much more clear. And it doesn't help that there isn't unified templating for assets and events. And if we know anything about inconsistent templating, trying to compare the two doesn't really mean anything. But we're going to do it anyways, because that's what players are naturally going to do since the keyword looks identical on the card. So under the rules reference section under events, we get an explanation that non-fast events are played during your turn using a play action, but fast events simply have a play instruction telling us when to play them. That's not like the fast assets that say nothing of the sort. Directing us back to the fast section of the rules reference, we read that we get either a timing point, such as a trigger, or a duration or period of time, or both, telling us when the card is available to play. To be clear, with cards that specify a duration, the card still needs to be played during any player window. Let's get a look at some examples because I don't know about you, but this is getting a bit too abstract. So, many events have some kind of triggering condition that allows you to play them, whether that is some kind of timing point or game state change. They're really like reactions, like the reaction symbol on assets, just found on events, but not with that symbol at all. Water protection is a classic. It's not played during any player window. You get to play it when you draw a non-weakness treachery, whenever that might be during the game. Lucky is another classic. I'm actually putting all core set cards in here. And Lucky is reacting to the point in a skill test where you're calculating your skill value and would fail the test. It's a bit strange that you retroactively gain skill value, but that's how the card works. Finally, Evidence reacts to the point after an enemy is defeated. Hey, that's just like William York's ability, and that one had a reaction symbol on it. There's nothing controversial about these core set cards, they just work. But the fast keyword is a bit redundant here. None of these cards could be played as a play action anyways, given their triggering condition. If you remember the discussion about Agatha Crane's ability earlier, it seems uncontroversial that she couldn't play any cards from the discard pile at the end of her turn with triggering conditions on them, such as crack the case. Now, that's not exactly what happens for cards that specify a duration or a period of time when they can be played. There's no triggering condition. So you don't get to just play them whenever you want. They just need to be played during a player window, like free triggered abilities on assets. Now, there's going to be some kind of bounds that are stated on the card. You need to find the correct, appropriate player window. By far the most common of this is play only on your turn, such as Mind Over Matter here. Although, I don't know what happened with the upgraded version, the only is missing. Yikes. Well, there are a few other possibilities. Take a look at Swift Reflexes and Anatomical Diagrams, which both allow you to play them on any investigator's turn, with some other restrictions. If the designers essentially want to have no restrictions on boundedness, they'll allow you to play the card during any player window at all, no matter whose turn it is, or even during some other phase of the game. This makes for some very fine upgrades to, say, Get Over Here, and No Stone Unturned, and allows for Premonition to be used in very versatile ways. Sometimes at the beginning of the round, sometimes in the middle of the skill test, wherever it makes sense. But then, very rarely, we get an event that just says fast. There are actually only 3 such cards that have no triggering condition and no appropriate duration specified. Here they are: Hiding Spot, Telescopic Sight, and Hunter's Mark, which, by the way, is from the newest expansion. When are we allowed to play them? It's not clear. Many people have pointed to this part of the rules reference, which, by the way, is under play, not under event or fast, to say that they are played during any player window by default. I don't completely agree. These cards simply do not state what the appropriate window is, and I'm not sure that the player gets to fill that in themselves. Should it be only during your turn instead? Doesn't matter too much for Telescopic Sight, but Hunter's Mark is worse under that interpretation, and Hiding Spot is even less playable than it already is. But here's the connection with Chuck Fergus. What does an event with fast and nothing more look like? Well, it's these cards. All of them probably mean any player window, but why are they missing the play instructions? Surely the absence means something, right? Because there's too much text already on these cards? Because they all attach to other cards? No, this is simply inconsistent templating. If they're meant to be played during any player window, why don't they say that? Get Over Here, No Stone Unturned, Premonition, they all do. Maybe the designers got their wires crossed with the rules for fast assets, where printing fast all by itself is the norm, although it comes with its own rules baggage. So, what were people trying to do with Chuck Fergus before the taboo? Well, they're playing it as if it said fast play during any player window, giving them the ability to use events like breaking and entering outside of their turn, or even outside the investigator phase. You know that player window that occurs after hunter enemies move but before they attack? Turns out that it's very powerful if you throw a fast backstab at a 3 health enemy that just moved into your location and defeat it before it gets to attack anyone. Very cool, very strong, but also a little cheesy. I don't think this was part of the design intention, and the current development team wasn't very happy with the idea either. Before this made it to the taboo list, they actually ruled that you were not able to use Chuck out of turn, but were convinced that the rules did allow for this and decided to nerf the idea through the taboo list instead. There's a missing piece to the whole puzzle here with Chuck, and that's the rules for the initiation sequence of playing events. Basically, the story goes like this. For many players, Chuck is already implied to only work during your turn because you wouldn't be able to initiate playing events like breaking and entering outside of your turn, since they require you to take an action. But that's not quite correct. The rules are a little hand-wavy here, but essentially the abilities on a card can change whether or not you meet the criteria for initiating playing the event. So think about that second bullet point on Chuck. If you have no resources, can you play breaking and entering using Chuck's ability to reduce the cost? Yes. Essentially, the when timing on Chuck's reaction lets you modify the card. And the same thing is true for it gaining fast. You declare that you want to play the card as if it already has these modifications on the card itself. The most similarly written card is Fence, which some players wondered if you could use Fence after your third action, since you wouldn't be able to initiate a play action afterwards. The designers responded, some time ago, that Fence gives the card fast before it is actually played, so this is taken into account during its initiation sequence. Most players, I think, find the resource reduction ability circumventing the initiation sequence to be much more intuitive than fast, for what I think are a few reasons. One, that playing cards out of turn is much more unusual than having additional ways to pay for things. And second, I suspect people really treat fast as something like action reduction. That is, the card costs 1 fewer action, rather than something that has some additional rules reference baggage. And that's, to me, why the game designers missed this templating to begin with. I bet they didn't dream of anyone playing it outside of their turn. Going back to Fence, since it already has during your turn printed as part of the cost to activate Fence, the question of what gaining fast means doesn't really matter. Now, there's a few more gains fast cards in the card pool. Taking a quick look, we have a bunch of customizable cards. Friends in Low Places and Makeshift Trap both have customizable abilities to give the card fast play during any player window, whereas Cryptic Grimoire, Daisy's Advanced Tote Bag, and Custom Modifications all explicitly restrict this to during your turn. Only Chuck Fergus and Parallel Roland's Red Tape give no guidance, which unfortunately reverts things back to how Hiding Spot at all work, if at all. Now, to me, there's really no reason for this. The clumsy way that the fast keyword is explained in the rules reference is avoidable, but it does expect that events should have their timing explicitly stated. Look at all these cards where they didn't forget to do that. Players are used to this. There's nothing worse when it comes to inconsistent templating than if words on cards are redundant with the rules. If fast by itself truly means something, then there's no reason to keep printing during any player window on cards like Premonition or Tempt Fate. If it doesn't mean anything, then it's a templating mistake, and players are just going to be confused. What Chuck Fergus needs is not a taboo, but an errata, along with Hiding Spot, Marksmanship, and Hunter's Mark, as well as Red Tape, which somehow escaped the taboo. I get that erratating cards like this is not FFG's priority, and I think most players will continue to play all the cards how they were intended. But a larger rules rehaul that reimagines fast cards using existing reaction or free trigger symbols would be my preference. I know that's just not going to happen with this iteration of the game, but I do hope that you found this all interesting as to what the root of the problems were. Let it serve as a lesson to write clearer rules and to follow templating much more consistently. If we don't, players will fill in the gaps with potentially unintended play experience themselves. I'm not asking the designers to be perfect, just to be able to go back and fix some mistakes or avoid them in the future. That's all from me. Until next time.